Hey guys, this is IX with RolloutReviews, bringing you another Bionicle review. This time it is set number 8557, the Exo-Toa. This set was released in 2002 and contains about 378 pieces. With the introduction of the now mass-produced Boxor in each village on Motunui, the Matorn were able to effectively push back the relentless storm of Bohrok that invaded their home. The Toa, who had previously been fighting hard to protect their people, now had the opportunity they needed to work towards putting an end to the swarms. Turaga Vakama decreed that the 6 Toa begin collecting all 8 types of Krana from all 6 breeds of Bohrok. Once they had collectively gathered all 48 in total, the heroes descended into the heart of the Bohrok Hive. Reaching an impasse, the team noticed keyholes in the floor of the chamber in which they stood. By placing the 48 Krana they had gathered into the slots, 6 passageways opened up around the room. Beyond each one stood a mighty Exo-Toa armor, dormant and waiting for the heroes to pilot them. Wearing the armor granted each Toa an immense boost in physical strength and equipped them with a powerful boxing claw and electro rocket, tools they would use to combat the Bohrok Queens, who waited for them through the next corridor. While the armor allowed the Toa use of their individual mask powers, it greatly hindered their elemental abilities. This proved to be a massive setback once they had accidentally let the Queens get too close to each other. The brute force of the Exo-Toa was no longer a match for the combined powers of the Balrog. The Toa had no choice but to shed their armored suits to defeat them. The Exo-Toa also features an autopilot mode and a built-in AI, which allows them to act on their own, functioning as mindless sentries without Toa operating them. We learned later that the 6 units found by the Toa Mata were placed in the Bohrok nests as a precaution to help control an outbreak in the event that the swarms were accidentally awoke prematurely. Come on, guys! You had one job! Obviously, when that exact thing happened, conveniently their systems did not activate, and they remained offline. But I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. In all likelihood, Makuta was behind that too. We'll take an in-depth look at the build, starting from the bottom up. The vent panels that make up the feet sit at an angle, quite literally. There's very little connection going on here, and if you tilt it any which way, they sort of just flap around. You've also got some pseudo pistons towards the back. If you accidentally disconnect those, the entire foot falls apart, so try your best not to do that. Now, the biggest missed opportunity in the entire set is the lack of articulation in the knee. The whole leg is one solid piece, and I can't help but think there might have been a way to incorporate a bend without sacrificing solidity. Towards the back, you have some dark gray Robo-Rider heads, and incidentally, they're attached with a hinge towards the top. I've always liked to see these as adjustable thrusters that help the Exo-Toa jump. You also have some more Robo-Rider heads acting as thigh armor, and they're kept in place with a rubber band, allowing them to conform rather nicely when you bring the leg forward and back. In the hip, you have some micro ratchets, the same variety found in Gadok and Kodok. Forward and back, you have a soft ratchet, and left and right, you have a delicious click. I'm not gonna lie, this entire assembly looks super weird and is unfortunate on multiple levels. So are these rubber bands towards the bottom, but that's all I'm gonna say about that. Towards the rear, you have this backplate, as well as some exposed ball sockets. Their only purpose is to mount this piece internally, and it seems to me like there were multiple ways they could have gone about doing that avoided this. Inside, it's extremely hollow and gappy, but given its purpose, that's only to be expected. You're meant to fit an entire Toa inside there, and to the set's credit, it actually does a fairly good job at hiding the gap. It's most prominent from this angle, and more often than not, the arm will be covering that up. from the front, and from the back, it's honestly not all that noticeable. The chest features more Robo-Rider heads. This set loves its Robo-Rider heads, as well as a black Bohrok headplate. Honestly, the way this entire chest plate is attached is a little bit annoying. The way it's mounted offers way too much wiggle room, and it often misaligns itself from the top. You've got some gears on the backpack, as well as some stark white axle pieces sticking up over the shoulders. I don't know why they made them such a prominent color, but I do know why they're there. They secure the backpack, the head, and the arms to the rest of the body. So yeah, they're pretty important. The reason they stick up so far is so that they're easily removable. If they were sunk in all the way, it would be a nightmare to disassemble this section. So they're a blessing and a curse. You have these tubes that run from the back into the sides of the head, and they're made up out of a soft rubbery plastic. I think these are a great addition. The head itself is something similar to the Bohrok-Va, using a Bohrok shield as a head crest. The eyes are a bit further sunken back though. From behind, light pools in and illuminates them under the brow of the crest. In certain lighting conditions, of course. It doesn't show up all that well here. I like how the mouthplate is made up out of a standard connector piece. Simple, but effective. It attaches the crest with a ball joint, meaning this can move around, for no particular reason. The head itself is completely immobile, just because of the way things attach. But as of 2002, that really shouldn't be much of a surprise. More Robo-Rider heads on the shoulders, as well as some vent panels on the chest and the upper arms. Unfortunately, you have some exposed axle ends. At the very least, those could have been covered up with some bushings. The right arm attaches with a smaller limb piece, leaving behind a ball joint where the elbow would be. Fortunately, it's towards the back and hides itself from most angles. This assembly is devoted to an action feature we'll take a look at a bit later, but mounted on the end you have a couple of dark gray golly hooks forming a claw, similar to the Boxor. Unfortunately, they're oriented upward, putting the Exo-Toa in this permanent curling pose. Without a bend or a rotation, you've got a serious case of gorilla arm syndrome, and there's not a whole lot you can do about that. A couple of detailed beams mount a Technic rocket launcher to the left arm. This is also attached to the body using a longer limb piece, meaning there's a ball joint in the elbow, providing both a bend and a rotation. A big improvement over the right arm. Unfortunately, you aren't able to utilize this movement very well. It's pretty limited forward and back, and if you point the rocket launcher off to the side, it loses a bit of practicality because of the lack of neck articulation. The Exo-Toa isn't able to look in the proper direction. Now we'll move on to play features, starting back over on this side. There's a triangular shape in the forearm, and by pressing on the top corner and bottom right corner, it extends out the claw like an accordion. The mechanism is extremely simple, but satisfying enough, and emulates something like a punching action, although technically it's a bit more like a backhand. At first glance, it seems strange that they would design it this way, but in actuality, it makes a lot of sense. And that's because while this is technically called a boxing claw, keep in mind what the Exo-Toa are meant to be fighting. Godok and Kodok. It's really more of a pulling tool. It's specifically designed to sweep up underneath, grab a hold, and yank this piece out. And it does it extremely well, at least much more so than an opposing Balrog's teeth. As I mentioned earlier, over on the left side you have a simple spring-loaded Technic missile launcher. And if you've ever played with a set that has one of these before, you know exactly how it works. At the top there is a trigger, and by pulling back, it launches a blunt rubber-coated projectile with an impressive amount of accuracy, power, and distance. Reloading it is just as simple. Keep in mind that the trigger is extremely touchy. Even the lightest of taps will send the missile flying across the room. And despite the fact that this is a fairly large piece of ammo, it's still losable, so pay attention and be careful to avoid the occasional misfire. Of course, the main play function is allowing a TOA to pilot it, but there are a couple of simple mechanisms involved in the preparation process. The first of which is the latching system for the cockpit. By pressing on this orange piece here, it unlocks it from the bottom, and these rubber bands swing the cockpit open. To close it, you lift it back up and lock it in place. I suppose technically this red rubber band is meant to do that last step on its own, but in my experience it rarely gets the job done. Next, coming up top and tilting this gear, we'll pull back on the Exo-Toa head with a multitude of hinges before collapsing it onto the backpack, providing an open space. The reason this rubber band is here is so that when you tilt the gear in the opposite direction, it'll spring and snap the autopilot head back into its original position. Once you open up the chest and swing back the head, the Exo-Toa is ready to accept a pilot. While it's by no means required, the instructions suggest you remove the TOA's weapons before putting them in the armor. From here, the process of actually getting your pilot inside is a little bit of a fiddly one. Especially for TOA with shoulders oriented in the broad position, as it makes it trickier to maneuver past the vent panels on the chest. It might be easier to approach the armor from the top, but it goes without saying that Liwa and Kopaka have a much easier time with this step. Next, the thigh armor parts flip down to either become footrests or pedals. The orange piece inside the cockpit fits into the lower back of the torso. While it doesn't lock in place, it keeps the TOA from moving around too much inside. All that's left to do is close up the chest panel, and there you have Tahu, all armored up. In this mode, what you see is what you get. While being able to add a TOA certainly offers a lot of play options, once they're inside, the Exo-Toa doesn't do anything else it couldn't do on its own. If anything, this causes a couple of limitations. The legs can only go forward about one click before the pilot's legs start to interfere. They can only go to the side about this far before things start looking a bit unnatural. But it's not like any of this articulation was all that useful in the first place. You have a substantial backpack, but the added weight towards the front, as well as the fact that the Exo-Toa just sort of naturally leans forward on its own, means that there aren't any weight issues unless you tilt the legs back a couple of clicks, and that's just silly. You have a couple of options as far as the arms go. You can leave them off to the side, you can push them in, or you can tilt them all the way back out of view to give off the illusion that maybe the pilot's arms are inside the arms of the Exo-Toa. That's sort of up to you. As long as they're reasonably out of the way, the armor is more or less unhindered. Of course, you still have access to the boxing claw and the electro rocket, but you still don't have any kind of head articulation because, well, the TOA inside didn't have anything like that to begin with. Speaking of which, while you can't do much to modify the autopilot head while retaining the function, you can in fact modify the TOA to allow neck articulation. I highly recommend doing this because it not only adds so much to the figure alone, but also adds a lot to this set by extension. With this modification in place, an armored TOA no longer has any problems looking down the barrel of their rocket launcher. Now within the story, all 6 of the TOA are able to don the armor, but in reality, there are a couple of complications. Tahu, Kopaka, Liwa, and Gali fit in just fine. But Onua and Pohatu run into some problems, ranging from minor to severe. For Onua, his head is just attached a bit too low, so it's an easy fix. Find some simple way to extend his neck, and you're good to go. Unfortunately for Pohatu, on the other hand, there's practically no way to fit his upside-down body type inside the armor without essentially reconstructing him completely. While this never actually happens in the official canon, the instructions also advertise being able to fit the Toa Nuva inside the Exo-Toa as well, provided you strip away some of their Nuva armor. As you might expect, Tahu, Kopaka, Liwa, and Gali once again have very little problems with this. Their slightly longer legs make fitting their feet on the pedals a little awkward, but nothing too major. This time around, because the Nuva armor raises the head up a bit higher, Onua is surprisingly able to fit inside without modification, albeit very snugly. While Pohatu Nuva is once again totally out of luck, unless of course he's entirely rebuilt and his toe extensions are removed. Even with the Mask of Speed, the poor guy just can't catch a break. To me, the Exo-Toa seems more like a proof of concept than anything else. It focuses on a couple of main ideas, accomplishes them fairly well, then just doesn't bother to do a whole lot else. While the visual design looks interesting enough, the almost complete lack of meaningful articulation leaves it looking stiff and clunky. The one large gorilla arm in relation to the other scrawny arm has the set looking lopsided and strange. Many of the attachment methods are rickety, and the placement of a couple certain elements is downright questionable. However, in my opinion, the big saving grace of the Exo-Toa is simply put. It's a badass suit of Mecha Robo battle armor. What else do you need? I don't know about you, but that alone is good enough for me. I wouldn't go so far as to get 6 of these things, but provided you own any of the compatible Toamata, I think it might be worth having at least one in your collection. Especially if you already have Kadak and Gadak, because this set makes a fantastic companion piece. So, that is about it guys, and this is IX Roll at IX, signing off.